I was in the garbage and God came and pulled me out. And I felt so clearly he came and pulled me out. So I felt even more his love. Let's take what Rachel said about her life and put it back in our story, right? So she's in the garbage, spiritually speaking, maybe emotionally speaking, maybe in other areas. And God comes and pulls her out. She feels so dramatically his love. Now he takes her back to the palace, and now she washes up, and she gets to put on some royal garments, and she gets to get some royal perfume, and she gets to be sitting and eating royal food, and she's part of the king's retinue. So she's not feeling on a daily basis the intensity of love that she felt when he pulled her out of that garbage. Now, obviously, the fact that he's maintaining her in the palace and he's helping her be acclimate to the palace environment and be accepted in the palace, crew, obviously that's love, but the love isn't as dramatic as when he pulled her out of the garbage. Chapter 46. We started chapter 46 last week. It's a really, to me, I'd use the word exciting chapter. It's a very loving chapter. It's a very practical chapter. It's a chapter I really feel very passionately about, and hopefully over this week, but maybe some people thought about it. Maybe some people did things to really try to, again, very practical bottom line, very practical. Focus on God's love for you. And according to the Alter Rebbe, we're all healthy people that have healthy relationships. When we notice and are aware of someone's love for us, we automatically, this is the point the Rebbe is saying, there's no work involved. That's why it's so karov ma'od ma'od, very, very accessible. The work is only being aware of God's love for you. And when we're aware of God's love for us, we just feel so strongly our love for God. The Rebbe here now says, Perush. Perush means he's explaining it. Now, why do you have to even explain? Now, it's so self-explanatory. But a person could wonder a little on this idea, because you could say, wait a minute. The whole source for this is a quotation from Mishlei. As water mirrors a face, so the heart to a heart. Kein lev ha'adam la'adam. So does the heart of one man mirror the heart of another man. This is written in Mishlei. Mishlei, written by King Solomon, is Proverbs. It's telling us how we are supposed to behave. So a person could say, wait a minute, something's off here. King Solomon is injuncting people how to behave. The Alter Rebbe is saying, this is natural. There's no work involved. When you feel someone's love for you, you love. That's the Rebbe's whole point, that there's no work. That's why it's Karav Mai. But if there's no work, what's it doing in Mishlei? Mishlei is King Solomon telling us how we are supposed to behave. That means how we're supposed to work on our behavior. The point is, there is a difference between in the context of Mishlei and in the context of Tanya. It's not a change in the principle. The Alter Rebbe is not deviating from King Solomon's principle. The principle is, you look in the water, the reflection comes back to you. You didn't have to do any work. It's a natural phenomenon. You feel someone's love, you feel love. You don't have to do any work. It's a natural phenomenon. So what's King Solomon saying then about this if it's no work? Solomon is advising, so be that loving person. Be the person who engenders love in the world, who engenders positivity and good feelings in the world, because you make sure you're a person that walks around loving, that walks around exuding all this positivity and love and good emotions. Because when you walk around with all this love and positive warmth for people, they will also feel it. So, ripple effect, it will be a world of love. It'll be a world of positive emotions. So that is the injunction in Mishlei. King Solomon is telling you to do something. But the Alter Rebbe is saying, look at the rule. The rule is applicable if you work or if you don't work. King Solomon is saying, work to create relationships and environments of love. And the Alter Rebbe is saying, taking this principle, let's apply it to God. And let's focus on me as the recipient, not me as the initiator, which is more the perspective in Mishlei, but me as the recipient of all this love from God. So now what happens? Well, look what King Solomon said. It's automatic that I feel that love back. Perush, meaning to say, Kimo shekitmus v'tzuras hapanim sha'adam mara b'mayim, just like the form of the face that a person sees in the water, which means we're not just seeing this like blur. We're not just seeing some vague colors that might be us if we have a little imagination. No, we see the tzura. We see the form. We see the demus Domeh. We see the similarity. So we really, if you look, I mean, I don't have to tell you this. Obviously, if you've ever looked in a still body of water, you see the reflection. Kain nira lo sham b'mayim osa tzura atzma. So there, it seems to him, in the water, that exact same tzura with all of its details. Again, the Rebbe is emphasizing this point that it's not that, well, if someone has a feeling for me, there might be some vague something going on by me, sort of like that. The Rebbe says no, because that's not what happens in the water. In the water, it's a very detailed, clear reflection, mirror of the one who's looking at the water. And that's what happens in relationships as well. Kacha mamish, so too literally. Now again, of course, we know that when the Alter Rebbe writes the Tanya, he's writing it very, very, very precisely. Me, I can't say I talk so precisely always. I could be dramatic. The Alter Rebbe is not being dramatic. The Alter Rebbe is saying every word as it is, with a lot of thought to every word. So the Alter Rebbe first laid out for us, fact of nature. Everyone at some point has seen themselves in a still body of water. And then the Alter Rebbe says, kacha, like this, mamish, literally, because that's the point the Alter Rebbe wants you to understand. I'm not giving you a mushal, a parable, which has a relationship to the nimshal, to the real truth. No, the looking in the water and seeing your reflection is exactly what's happening from heart to heart. Mamish, Alter Rebbe says, literally. Leiv ha'adam ha'ne'eman ba'avaso, the heart of a man who is faithful in his love, lish acher, to another person. Now it's interesting, the Alter Rebbe added that word hane'eman, who is faithful. And I think that's a significant word, because we could look at this and say, I don't know, sometimes I'm really nice to people and I don't see them being nice back. Sometimes I'm trying to show, a lot of warmth and I don't really ever see anything come back to me. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, now I'm not judging anyone in any situation, but I'm just focusing on the words of the Alter Rebbe. He's saying hane'eman ba'avaso. And again, every word of the Alter Rebbe is precise, has an import, is thought out. The Alter Rebbe is saying you need to be ne'eman in your love. You need to be faithful in your love. You need to be consistent in your love. It needs to be something that the other person knows is for real. Because we all have experienced flaky relationships, right? We all know people that are, I won't even say fair weather friends. I'll just say depends on the weather friends. The Alter says, no. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a consistency, a constant of a relationship that you are really ne'eman. You are really showing the other person love in a consistent, reliable fashion, which of course sort of means you're making yourself vulnerable. You're exposing yourself, because what we're saying is your love is going to evoke the other person. So that means right now they're not necessarily showing you any love, but still you really care about the person and you're showing your care, and your expression of your care is consistent. Why is it so important consistent? Because again, consistent tells the other person this is real. Of course, we know, as we've mentioned before, that according to Hasidus, truth, something that's really true, has to be constant. If it's sometimes yes and sometimes no, it's not real. That's true as Hasidus looks at many things, and clearly as it looks at relationships. So when a person is ne'eman in his ahava, when he's on a regular, consistent basis, feeling the love and expressing the love that the other person knows. Also, as we mentioned last week, this does not work, this dynamics is not going to happen when buried in the deep recesses of your heart you have a deep love. We probably have deep loves that are in our heart. That's not going to cause this evoking of a love. It's not a magical, mystical concept. It's very pragmatic. So when you feel the love, consistent, and you express it consistently, the other person will naturally respond with love as well. As the Rebbe says, Harei ha'ava zu, this love, me'oreres ava b'lev chavero elav, will arouse, as we're saying, naturally arouse. The other person's not working, but it's going to naturally elicit love in the heart of the other person to you. Gamkin. Also, that they should actually be equally faithful in their relationship, in their love, one to the other. Obviously, one initiated the relationship, but once he got the ball rolling and the other person sees and senses and trusts the realness of this love, then the other person responds, and then it goes back and forth. So it's a relationship of love to love to love to love. And of course, as I said, especially this is true when the love is expressed. Because if you're not really expressing it, the other person might not be aware of it. And if you're sort of subtly expressing it, the other person might be aware of it. But if you're really clearly expressing it on a constant basis, the other person's going to be aware of it, and the other person will naturally love you as well. This is always true. This is a constant. This is a law of nature. But within the law of nature, we could analyze it a little to see how the love could get stronger and stronger depending on the dynamics between these two people. We're talking here about humans. Obviously, we are going to take all this and apply it to our relationship with God. But to understand, we're scaffolding by talking about humans. So let me ask you, because it's so nice to hear someone else's voice besides my own. The Rebbe is saying, King Solomon is saying, if someone loves you honestly, sincerely, consistently, and expresses that love, you automatically love them back. What factor, what dynamic in the relationship would make it even, I'll say, easier or stronger or swifter that you would feel a love for that other person who's loving you? Any thoughts? What would make this even stronger, even more quickly than what we've said until now? Maybe my question is too vague because the answer is very obvious, so I'm clearly not saying the question right. In what situation would you love the other person even more quickly than the norm we've been discussing? Firma, did you have an idea?
I was just going to say action speaks louder than words. So if someone does something for you that's, saves you or something like really above and beyond, then it's the action would even
That makes a
more.
lot of sense. That's not the point that I was going to say, because I would,
When it
but
comes
I think
from
what Firma is saying is good in general, meaning when we say express the love, express the love, express the love, what does that mean? So I think what Firma is saying is very true in terms of us understanding this, that as she's saying actions. Bracha, what were you going to add?
When it comes from a great person.
When it comes from a great person, excellent. My gosh, on the target. Why?
Because we feel very privileged.
Exactly. So what Firma said is very valid, because going back to what the author was saying initially, what does it mean you're expressing your love for me? And words could sometimes be empty and sometimes feel meaningless. So definitely a consistent expression of love probably should have an action that is that consistent expression, for sure. And that was a good point. And what Bracha is saying is the direction the Alter Rebbe is going to go now in terms of how even stronger the love is when the person who's showing you this love is not your equal. Now, why? Well, Bracha said, because you feel privileged. That's a good way to look at it. You feel honored. You feel, wow, this is so cool. That person didn't even know I exist, let alone that person has a feeling for me. I remember, now, this isn't exactly a love relationship. My high school, when I was growing up, wasn't a high school of 9th through 12th. It was actually a 7th through 12th, which is not typical in America. I don't know. That's how it worked in my days. So I'm this little 7th grader in a high school, a large high school of 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. And I have a very clear memory that one day in my little 7th grade classroom, we're the bottom of the barrel, this very cool, popular 12th grader and like two of her friends walked into the classroom, walked over to me. I don't remember what she said to me. Something like, you were in my dream last night or whatever. I don't remember what the engagement really was between the two of us. But it was like, whoa, she even knows I exist. That's so cool. I was in her dream, whatever. It felt special because I'm a little 7th grader. She's a big 12th grader. And what's the difference between a 7th grader and 12th grader at the end of the day? But that's how humans work. So the smaller we are, the more the other person's noticing us is impactful. The bigger the other person is, the more the other person's noticing us is impactful. Now imagine it goes in both directions. The person who's showing love is so big, and the person who's receiving the love is so small. Wow. How much more would this love automatically come out when the very small person sees that the very big person consistently is showing such real love? And as from said, definitely with action. That's going to be the most powerful way. So let's read this inside. V'hine, behold, zehu teva nog b'midas kol adam. This works for everyone. This is human nature. Again, assuming everyone is healthy, everyone is normal, everyone has normal relationships. That's a lot of assumptions, of course. But assuming all that, this is the nature of man. Doesn't mean Jewish man, doesn't mean clearly religious man. This is the nature of man. When you experience someone consistently expressing love, you feel love for them. Now this works even if the two are equals. Co-workers, in the same class in school, neighbors, go to the same synagogue, whatever, two equal people. And the other person keeps showing that they really like you, they really like you, they really like you, you start liking them. I don't know if anyone's had that experience, but it's really very powerful and it really works. Well, achas kama v'kama, how much more so? Im. Now here the Rebbe is going to tell us a story. It's a mashal. It's a parable to express the point, as we said, from both ends. They're so much greater and you're so much lower. It works when they're equals. Imagine if the other person is much greater. How much more would it work? Imagine if you're much lower. How much more would this love naturally, no work on your part, be elicited when you feel it. So the Rebbe is going to tell a story. It's actually very interesting because I remember once I was reading my children a children's book many years ago, obviously, and the children's book really said this story, and I was wow, was this book based on Tanya? It wasn't coming from a Chabad source. I didn't see any obvious anything that showed it was based on this idea in Tanya, but literally a children's book that exactly brought this point out in a very, very, very powerful way. So here's the story. In Melech, if there's a king already means he's way beyond you because you're probably a commoner. But let's make it more intense. Gadol, he's not just, if there's just for a king, but he's not just a king. He's a great king. V'rav, and he's a very high king, very mighty, very powerful. So he's a king. And he's a great king, and he's a powerful king. All of these adjectives have meaning. All of these adjectives in the story are really reflecting the reality of what this is talking about, which is, again, God and me. So it's God. Well, clearly he's the king and I'm the commoner. And he's clearly a great king and not just a great king. He's the king of all kings, Rav. He's the ultimate power, the ultimate source, the ultimate energy. Mara, he showed. Avaso hagedula va'atsuma. His great, mighty love. Not just, a little. Great love. Mighty love. Leish hedyot. To a commoner. Okay, he's the king and we're the commoners. The Rebbe says, no. It's a lot more intense than that. Not just a commoner. V'nivzeh. A lowly person, a person that's sort of despised by others. Vishvala nashim, low among men, not the commoner, like the dregs. Umenuval, he's dirty. Hamutal ba'ashba, he actually is living in the garbage. He's living in the garbage dumps. So imagine this king, powerful, majestic king, obviously lives in a very clean palace where every need is taken care of. I think they say in Buckingham, they put the toothpaste on the toothbrush for you, right? So, and that's nothing. That's nowadays. Imagine a king. And he said, we're going to take a royal trip. So he goes into the royal wagon with all the royal courtiers, a beautiful wagon, probably pristine white, covers on all the seats. And he's sitting there with all of his beautiful robes and all of the ministers dressed like, and there's the king. And then the king directs the horsemen, no, don't go the normal road. Don't go down the beautiful boulevards. Don't go to the beautiful parks. Go to the edge of the city. The edge of the city, that's where the poor people live. Go to the edge of the city. And okay. And they're traveling past the nice areas to the average areas, to the not such nice areas, to the slums of the city. The king says, keep going. Everybody in the carriage is like, what is going on? Let's go past the slums. Well, what's at the edge of the city? What at the edge of the city is the garbage dump. So you're getting closer and closer, and obviously the smells are horrific. It's not like the garbage dump gets sanitized. And the smells are horrible. And all these courtiers are only used to life in the palace. They've never smelled anything like this. They're all feeling so nauseous. And the king's just sitting there like, this is fine, beautiful trip. And they come to the garbage dump. And the king descends from his wagon and he walks over to the garbage. And there, literally living in the garbage, is someone who just looks like another piece of garbage. And the king goes over to that person and he picks him up from the garbage and he brings him back into his royal carriage on those beautiful white silk or satin or velvet seats. This person's like dripping garbage. King doesn't realize. The king's oblivious. The king's looking at him and talking to him and showing such care and concern and compassion and love. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, how could he stand that smell? I don't know if any of you have ever been in a situation where you've been near someone who smells really bad. This is obviously far worse. The king doesn't even notice. The king tells the royal horses, come, let's go back. We're going back to the palace with our friend, with this wonderful gentleman we just found in the garbage. The king descends, he goes down from his royal carriage to him, to the garbage. Mimkom kavodo, the king goes from his place of honor. Im kol sarav yachtav, he and all of his officers, and obviously they're going to escort the king even though he's walking out in the garbage, but they got to go too. Umakimo, he picks him up. Merimo, he elevates him. He brings him out, me ashpaso, from his garbage. Umachniso lehechalo hechal hamel, and he brings him back. He brings him all the way back to the palace of the king. Cheder lifnim mecheder. He takes him in room after room. The king is taking this person. He's not just like got him out of the garbage. He's bringing him to the palace. It's not just bringing him to the palace. He's bringing him into inner chamber after inner chamber after inner chamber, room after room after room. A place where nobody goes. No servant goes there. No officer goes there. These are the intimate rooms of the king. And he's alone with him there. With a oneness, v'kiruv amiti, with a true closeness, v'chibuk, v'nishuk, v'stapkus rucha berucha, v'cholev v'nefesh. And he's pouring on him love. He's pouring love on this person. He's embracing him, he's kissing him, he's clinging to him, he's pouring his soul out to him with all of his heart, with all of his soul. This king, this great king, this majestic king, to this person that lives in the garbage. Al achas kama v'kama. Well, that's a lot more than what we were saying before. Shetis oirer memela, that automatically it should be ignited, it should be aroused. Ha'ava kfulu muchpeles. This love, and even more intense, and even more doubly doubled love, belev ha'hedyot v'shval anashim. In the heart of this person who's a commoner, he's not just a commoner. He's like the bottom of the barrel. And that's how he's lived, at the bottom of the barrel. And that's how people have treated him his whole life, at the bottom of the barrel. And suddenly, the king recognizes him for human, recognizes him for a special, beautiful individual, and shows that to him and expresses that. Well, how much is that person going to feel, El Nefesh HaMelech? How much is he going to love this king? With such depth of love, such feeling, limitless love in his heart. Now, we're talking about a person that had a very hard life. Again, if we're thinking of the reality of the storyline, the king, I mean, we can only just fantasize what it means, a king, and a great king, and a powerful king, and then a commoner, and then a low person, and then someone who's in the garbage. Now, someone who has such a life obviously has become hardened, to survive living in the garbage, to survive living in the dumps of the dumps of the dumps. You can't even imagine what this person has gone through. So this person's not a warm, lovey person. He can't be. He wouldn't have survived. I mean, maybe he started out that way. But if he's gone through such hard stuff, if he's gone through such knocks and blows of life, to end up living like this, clearly he has totally shut down his emotions. He has to. It's the only way he can survive. So his heart is not so receptive. His heart is very cold. His heart is like a stone. Because that's what happens when life treats you this way and people treat you this way and you start looking at yourself this way. So, to survive, he became very, very cold. So here you have the greatest of the great of the great pouring this love to a person who is not really going to feel for others. It's interesting. I mentioned that I once read my children a book that really said this. It was like, obviously a children's book version of this parable, but it was really intense. As I said, I searched it afterwards. Was this all based on Tanya? I could never figure it out because it didn't say anywhere, anything, just sort of this point. So in the story, there's the king who goes to the garbage. And in the garbage, there's a family that lives in the garbage. And the king comes down off of his royal carriage and he sees this whole family living in the garbage. And his heart goes out for people that are literally living off of it in garbage. He says, come with me, come to the palace. Now, this story actually had a different point than the Rebbe's making here. So in this story, everybody said, no, they're not going. They're not going. There was one child that said he wanted to go with the king. And he goes with the king. And he's taken back to the palace, and he's raised as a prince while his family continues living in the garbage. And then years later, he comes back, whatever. The story continues, as you can imagine. But if we just take now this is also a story. This is a children's story. But if you just envision that concept, why are they saying no? They trust the king. They trust any people. They believe in the king. They believe in any people. They're going to be open and receptive to someone being nice to them and warm. They're going to be trusting. You probably don't trust anyone if life has brought you to this point. So the Rebbe goes on to say, "V'af im libo kalev ha'even." Even if this person, his heart is like a stone, which would make sense contextually if you understand the story of where he's been living until now. Hames yumes, the stone will melt. V'haya lemayim, that stone's gonna flow like water. V'tishtapech nafsho kemayim. His soul, his feelings will flow like this water. Bechlos hanefesh mamish, with almost like an expiring of the soul. La'avas hamelach, for love of the king. That is the story. It's a very dramatic, very clear, very simple, very powerful story. That, the Rebbe says, is the story of our relationship to God. And the Rebbe is bringing this out, and you could say, I don't really think I live in the garbage. Everything, of course, is relative. As we're saying, there's the equals. Then there's if the person is greater than you. Remember the 12th grader to the 7th grader. And then there's if you're much lower. We have God in all of his greatness. And we might have us in all of our lowness. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily every one of us is so low. But it's almost like the Rebbe is saying, it's not almost like the Rebbe is saying, the lower you are, the easier it is to feel the love. Meaning, if you're walking around and you are very comfortable with your spirituality, you're a good person, you're an Orthodox person, your day is full of serving God, and then you're aware, you learn this chapter of Tanya, and you start thinking about it, and you're aware of how much God loves you. There might be a little piece of you that feels, Magili, makes sense. I'm doing for God all day, and God loves me. Yeah. And now that I'm aware of God's love for me, of course, he's still God and I'm still the commoner, so it arouses naturally my love for him. But there's a little bit of, I don't want to say complacency, but something like that. There's a little sense of sort of righteousness. Yeah, makes sense. But not everyone feels like that in terms of their relationship to God. And the Rebbe is giving this metaphor of the person in the garbage to imply that if a person is walking around and they don't feel, yes, they're so wonderful and amazing and do for God all day long, they might not feel as strong and confident in what they're doing for God. When they are aware, when they are focusing themselves on what God does for them, it's even more powerful, the love. Because there's no sense of makes sense on any level. Why is God showing me such love? Just as the person who's living in that garbage dump and the king comes down, no regular person would come close to the garbage, let alone the king's coming to the garbage, the king and the powerful king and the great king. Why? Why is he dirtying his robes for me? Nobody comes close to me. Why? And that sense of what is going on? How could someone so great think of love of me? It makes his response so much stronger. And anybody's response will be strong. But it makes it even stronger. And that's why the Rebbe says maybe this person has a stone heart. It's probable in his situation he has a stone heart. But his stone heart will melt. So if a person, taking away from the storyline to our own reality, if we do not feel so confident in how wonderful we are for God and how much we give God and how God must be so happy with us and how, all day we're just giving to him and serving him. If we don't necessarily feel that way, you know what the Rebbe says? This love is even stronger because it doesn't make sense. Because it's undeserved. Because of the par. Why would God's going to show love? Okay, show love to that person. Show love to that great person. Show love to that person. Me? When you recognize how God shows love to you, that makes it even more powerful. So again, if you and God were on the same level, and of course we're not, still, when you're aware of his love for you, it elicits naturally, without any work on your part. We love that line, without any work on your part, of course, your love for God. But when it's God, obviously it's not equal. And it's God, the King of all kings, the creator of all, the essence and being. Yeah. So when he is expressing love, wow. But then when you look at yourself and you don't feel that you're so strong and great and amazing in your service to God, it's even more. You remember, last week we said that the Rebbe calls this, as we read inside, the derech karov ma'od ma'od, the very, very close road to accessing very strong emotions for God. This is, of course, based on the verse that the entire 53 chapters of the first section of Tanya is explaining. And the verse says, the matter is very close to you. It's very close. It's very accessible to love God completely, to fear God, revere God, be in awe of God completely. And through that love and awe and reverence, you will absolutely serve him. You absolutely want to give him everything. You want to be connected to him completely. You want to hold back and restrain from anything that would impede the relationship. All you need to do, this is the basic premise of Tanya, is really, really love and have awe of God, and everything falls into place. So we've spent 45 chapters trying to figure out how we're going to have that intense feeling for God. And the Rebbe said here, and this is the only time the Rebbe says this in the entire time, for all 53 chapters, the only time I don't have up my sleeve another even easier. No, this is it, guys. We got to the max. This is, the Rebbe calls it, not just as a verse says, karov ma'od, very doable, close, accessible. The Rebbe calls it karov, very, very accessible. And we can look at it and understand that based on what we're just saying here. It's karov, it's close, it's natural to feel love when someone else is consistently, faithfully demonstrating, with lots of actions, their love for you. You will love them back, rule of nature. Karov, you don't have to work on it. It's karov ma'ayid. It's even more close. It's very close when the person showing you the love is such a great person. Like Bracha said, you feel privileged. You feel honored. He knows I exist, and he's showing me all this emotion. Oh my gosh. It's even more natural. It's even faster. It's even stronger, the response of my love to his love. But it's karov ma'ayid ma'ayid. It's very, very close. If not only is he so great, but I view myself as low, then even more am I just awed by the fact that he knows of my existence, cares about my existence, is showing consistently his care. Wow, is that love intense? So really, the karov ma'ayid ma'ayid, it's so, so, so close. In a sense, the advantage of this love is the lower you are, the more natural it should be, because you should have the sense right away. We should have the sense of, God is doing this for me. Who am I to deserve this? Who am I to deserve all this love? Why? Why is he showing such care in every detail of my life? Trust me, when you exercise this muscle, as we discussed at length last week, I hope people did over the week. This is not theory. I'm not looking for anyone to become a theologian here. This is practical. The more you notice God's love for you, what you will start to realize, if you don't already realize, is it goes to the smallest details. Sometimes you'll look at something that happened and say, to such a degree? God, you bother doing all that just for this little thing? I don't know if anyone's had that experience, but I've definitely had the experience where I'm like overwhelmed, not just with God's love, but God's love expressed in what in my eyes are small details of my life. Like, I didn't have to work so hard for that. It's nice, but it's not even like I would have needed that or asked you for that. It's a small detail. I mean, it's nice that it worked, but it's a small detail. God says, there's no such thing as a small detail. No such thing. Every detail of your life, I'm part of. In every detail of your life, if you look, you'll see me. You'll see my love. When we are exercising the muscle, again, it could be that we look at ourselves and really feel, yeah, who am I for God to be showing me all this love? And it could also be when you notice in the tiniest details how God expresses the love. That's really a sense of like, wow, wow. And you really feel that love back. So before we read this inside, I know there's any questions or thoughts on any of
I would like to say something,
Sure.
Rebbetzin.
Sure.
Actually, when we are down in that place, in that low, are you there? Sorry,
Yes.
somebody tried calling me. That's actually, I feel from my personal life that that's where Hashem actually loved me the most. He took me as low as possible, but from there, I came to know Chabad, I came to know the Rebbe, I came closer to Hashem. So that's when I was very, very low, that I think that that's when he loved me the most. I mean, even though later on, I mean, I said, why I did this, why did you do that? But still, that was the place where I actually came up and grew.
I
So
totally hear what you're saying, and I think what you're saying actually is resonating with the mashal, with the metaphor, with the parable. Because what you're saying is, yeah, that was me. I was in the garbage, and God came and pulled me out, and I felt so clearly He came and pulled me out. So I felt even more His love. Let's take what Rachel said about her life and put it back in our story, right? So she's in the garbage, spiritually speaking, maybe emotionally speaking, maybe in other areas, and God comes and pulls her out. She feels so dramatically His love. Now He takes her back to the palace, and now she washes up, and she gets to put on some royal garments, and she gets to get some royal perfume, and she gets to be sitting and eating royal food, and she's part of the king's retinue. So she's not feeling on a daily basis the intensity of love that she felt when He pulled her out of that garbage. Now, obviously, the fact that He's maintaining her in the palace and He's helping her be acclimate to the palace environment and be accepted in the palace, crew. Obviously, that's love, but the love isn't as dramatic as when He pulled her out of the garbage. So you're absolutely right. It's true in the story. It's true in all of our lives. When we're in those moments of really feeling low, of really being needy, of really being abandoned, of really being desperate, and God pulls us out, we see so strongly the love. And then when He, with that love, with His help, brings us to a place of normalcy, of sanity, of okayness, the love is still there, but we might experience it in a more muted way because we don't have that same depth of need and dramatic, escape, dramatic elevation that we had when we were in that low place. So what you're saying is perfect. It makes perfect sense, and it's really true for all of us. When we look at our relationship to God, I'm sure every single one of us can think of time we were, what that means to each person individually would be individual, but we were in the garbage. And we could think, hopefully, of how God pulled us out and loved us anyway and helped us. And those were dramatic moments in our life. And then we could look at sort of the daily within a normal good routine, and it's more subtle. It doesn't mean the love is any less. It just means it's not expressed in those big dramatic strokes. When a mother loves her child and every day makes lunches and wakes them up in the morning and makes sure they get dressed and takes them to school and brings them home and makes them supper and has them do homework and puts them to bed, I don't know if children walk around feeling, oh, my mother loves me so much. But it's the day in, day out consistency of what hopefully when they mature and look back will realize was love. So you're absolutely right, Rachel. What you're saying makes perfect sense. Anyone else? Any other thoughts or reflections on this? Or questions? I hope it's resonating. I hope you see this in your life just as Rachel looked at her life, because that's, of course, the idea. So now the Rebbe is going to speak, like cosmically, so to speak, for us as a nation when God got us out of the garbage. But, of course, for this to work and for us to have a very, very close, natural love for God, we have to take it and apply it to ourselves. And we have to look and see where in my life do I see God's love shining, even or especially when I'm in the garden. Just like all of these words, it was actually quite long, and Tanya is very careful with words, but the Alter Rebbe spent a lot of words on that story because he wants you to really get it. Like all of this image, Uvegoidel yeser ma'o bekifle kiflayim le'en kates. Well, a lot more, much more, doubly double more, infinitely more. Asalanu Elokeinu did our God do for us? Talking now as a nation. Now, why am I saying by God and us, the story is a lot greater than by the king and the garbage? Because God's greatness is far more infinite than the greatest human king. And we were in a much worse garbage. Because to his greatness, there's no limit. He fills all worlds. And he encompasses all worlds. And as we know from the Holy Zohar and from the Arizal, it's nice we're mentioning the Arizal. This Friday is the Yortzeit, the 5th of Menachem Av, of the Arizal Hachai. So it's nice that we are literally reading about him tonight in Tanya. Ribo Hechalos, the enormity of chambers, Va'ilamos, the enormity of worlds, Adein Mispar, beyond number. Ubechol Oilam Vehechal, and in every world and in every chamber, Riboy Revovos Malachim, tens of thousands of angels, Lain Kates V'Tachlis, to a limitless number. Now we're going to sort of question this limitless number, just to show how real what we're saying is. Ukmashakasa b'Gemara, as it's written in the Gemara, Ksiv, it's written, Hayesh Mispar Lugadudav. Is there a number to his troops? Can we count the troops of God, the troops of angels? Viksiv, and it's written, Elef Alfim Yisham Shune, V'Riba Revav Kadmui. 1,000 thousands will serve him, and tens of thousands will precede him. So, what do I see here? On one hand, I'm said, can you number God's troops? And then the next verse gave me a number. 1,000 thousands serve him. Well, 1,000 thousands is a number. 10,000 times 10,000 stand before him. Well, 10,000 times 10,000, that's a number. So what's going on? Meaning you could say, oh my gosh, that's like the same thing. 10,000 times 10,000, limitless, 1,000 thousands. No, it's not. Is it an astronomical number or is it beyond number? So what does the Gemara say? 1,000 thousand, that's the quota of one troop. But his troops, we can't count them at all. Umishne elef alafim v'chule mispar gedud. So we learn, how does the Gemara reconcile the seeming discrepancy between saying it's limitless and saying, no, it's not limitless, it's 1,000,000. It's 10,000 times 10,000. So the Gemara says those numbers, 1,000,000, 10,000 times 10,000, that's the number of one troop of angels. Avalugdudave mispar. But I don't know how many troops he has. His troops are limitless. His troops are beyond counting at all. Not because my eye can't scan all of them. I'm not privy to know how many there are, because they are limitless, believable, beyond any number, because the number doesn't end. And all of them are like nothing in their existence before God. They're all totally nullified. All of these angels exist like one word exists inside of us before we even think it. If you remember in chapter 20 and 21, I know chapter 20 and 21 were a while ago, but in chapter 20 and 21, we really analyze this concept because God creates with words, and all of creation is words. So to understand the non-existence of creation, we looked at a word versus the person saying the word, and how nothing that word is. And then we took it even more strongly and we said, well, that's a spoken word. But before that spoken word, there's the word as it's conceptualized in thought. And then before the word that's conceptualized in thought, there's the word as it is in emotions before it becomes thought. And then before there's the word in emotion, before it becomes thought, there's that word in one's subconscious. Not yet even emotional. So we have the word in the subconscious that then becomes a word from an emotional awareness, that then becomes a word of thought, that then becomes a spoken word, and then what's that spoken word compared to the speaker? That, the Rebbe is saying, is all of these, not limitless because I can't count them, limitless because the number's too big for me to know. Truly limitless. Troops and troops of troops that are limitless. All of those angels, in comparison to the reality of God, are not like one word. They're not like one word that's thought. They're not like one word that's felt. They're like a word when it's still in your subconscious. That's what they are compared to God. Now, why are we going into all of this? Because we want to really get the reality of what that beautiful story of the king and the garbage really means. And we said that king is so great and mighty. Well, what do we mean when we're talking about God? What we mean when we're talking about God is beyond anything we could ever talk about a human king or the richest man on planet Earth today or anything. So we just now explored a little, what do we mean by the greatness of God? And we will continue, not next week, because next week is the 9th of Av. So in 2 weeks, we will continue exploring the greatness of God and the lowness of the Jewish people and his absolute love for us, going into the garbages of our existence to pull us out and to bring him close to him. And you don't have to wait 2 weeks to do the work of this chapter. I sure hope everyone's been doing it for the past week. If I didn't convince you last week, maybe this week you'll listen. Take time every day. This is practical. This class is not to walk away and say, oh, that was beautiful, inspiring, lovely, or any other nice word. And that's good too. But it's like, how do I translate this into the reality of my life? I translate into the reality of my life by thinking, where do I see God's love for me? And then focusing on all the little details, because the little details are even more awesome. He loves me that much, he's even taking care of that little detail. As you notice and notice and notice God's love, like the Alter Rebbe says, your love is just the automatic response.